everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of May and the new moon that we have coming up in Gemini on the 30th. Before I get to the astrology, I just want to mention that people have made me aware that I have a lot of followers on Instagram and WhatsApp, and I'm not on Instagram or WhatsApp, so whoever people are following, it's the scammers, it's not me. I am on Facebook, MeWe, Telegram, Unified, but not Instagram and not WhatsApp, and I just don't want you to lose any money. Okay, so let's talk about the astrology. There is so much happening. We are still very much within the influence of those eclipses. The total lunar eclipse supermoon on the 15th, 16th of May was massive. It's like striking a massive gong that will continue to reverberate through the next 5 or 6 months. So it's not over. You know, remember what I say about astrology, it's a process, not a pinpoint. And so all of those themes that I talked about in that last video, and I'll put the link below so you can refresh your memory if you want to, are going to continue. And they are picked up in this second half of May by some very specific things I'll be talking about as well. Now, all through this month as well, Uranus stays on the world axis. And by stays, I mean is in hard aspect to, is in semi-square to the Aries point. So whenever something is in hard aspect to the Aries point, the world axis, I just call it an equals, essentially, because the geometry is coming together. So you can probably do this part of the video yourselves. You're very familiar with Uranian energy. Probably it's about shocks, surprises, earthquakes, volcanoes of all kinds, political, financial, particularly around currencies, etc., because it's in Taurus, and that is a long-running transit until it doesn't finally move out of Taurus until 2026. But it's also about truth. It's about clarity. It's about higher mind, and it's about awakening. So I think we could see a lot of further waves of awakening linked to this new moon. Jupiter moved into Aries over the 0 degree of Aries. That's the very first degree of the entire zodiac on 10th, 11th of May. And as I talked about in the last video, see where Aries falls in your chart, because this has vigor, this has life force, this has energy. It's a whole new start. It's a whole new adventure, project, creative burst, whatever it is. So you've got to see where Aries falls, which house area it falls in your chart. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website, go to the link below, and you can get the 2-part video series that you can watch ad infinitum with every update I do to give you the meaning in your own life of what's transpiring in this particular phase of time. But Jupiter has a very reliable 12-year orbit. So if you go back to June 2010, or January 2011, those were the 2 months where Jupiter was at 0 of Aries. It probably wouldn't have happened in both of the months, but something would have occurred very likely in one of those months that was a sense of expansion or personal growth or liberation or recognition, depending on where it was falling. You know, was it in your 4th house? Were you expanding your home in some way? Was it in the 5th house? You're expanding your creativity? Was it in the 10th house, you were changing your job or getting recognition and success in your work? It's very much conditioned by the house area. So see what was happening then, because the reason I say that is we tend to get an echo. It vortexes upwards. Whatever was happening last time, we get an echo of that again in the same area of life, of course, but vortexing upwards in its manifestation. So, and Aries has this freshness, as I say, this newness, that we're moving out of anything that's kind of sludgy and old and stale. And that's so much about the astrology of these times. You know, the endings and beginnings are so clearly marked in the astrology. Mars moves into its own sign of Aries, the warrior sign of Aries, on the 25th of the month, and stays there until early July. And the whole time that Mars is in Aries, it's going to add an energy, a focus, a drive, and a determination to what Jupiter is doing in that sign. So for instance, by the 29th, they have come into conjunction, and that is very much about fighting for causes that have a bigger future vision, Jupiter, that have more meaning for you than what has gone before. So there's tremendous conviction and focus in that. This is very fiery energy. Aries energy just wants to do. It's got a strong physicality. It just wants to go, just wants to do. And we have to remember that Mercury is still retrograde until the 3rd of June. So just be careful you check all the detail and the basis, because this surging forwards, this momentum coming in. We just got to go do it. We'll make sure we just check everything before we go do it. But it is fiery energy. We're going to see a lot of fiery energy this year. We had a lot of water energy, particularly around the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and we anticipated some flooding, and tragically there's some terrible floods in Eastern Australia and in South Africa. They were really extreme. But now we're moving into a more fiery period, and in the Northern Hemisphere particularly, I think we will see a lot of fires through this year, and we will see fiery words, fiery behavior. It's hot. It's potentially a very hot period as we move through this year. And really, even as we get into the last 3 months, Mars is moving into another sign that may bring a lot of heat either to the world or particularly to the Southern Hemisphere in terms of the environment. But let us use this very positively for drive and focus in terms of what we want to achieve. So that conjunction between Mars and Jupiter remains tight, almost exact, on the 30th, when we have the new moon at 9 degrees and 3 minutes of Gemini. This happens at 4:30 a.m. Pacific, and it happens at 12:30 p.m. lunchtime, British Summer Time in the UK. So let me show you the chart. So here we go. As always, I set this for London because I live in the UK. If you don't live here, as I always say, ignore the houses, ignore the clock face. We're just looking at where the planets are falling and their aspects to each other. Just to echo as well as Jupiter being in a strong position and crossing that Aries point, we also have Uranus, as I mentioned, in aspect to the Aries point. And both planets are connected to freedom, truth, and also, in the case of Jupiter, justice. So let us look at this new moon. As always, the sun and moon are tightly together at a new moon, and this is a perfect time to set a new intention for whatever you want to achieve in the world. Particularly look at where the house area that these fall in your birth chart. Gemini is about our mental function. It's about our thoughts, our ideas, our self-talk, all that unconscious kind of rolling around our heads of you're not good enough, smart enough, young enough, pretty enough, all of that kind of negativity that we're barely conscious of that rolls around our heads. I'm very aware from my old corporate days that apparently around 60% of the thoughts we think every day are exactly the same as the thoughts we thought yesterday. And they are about 60% exactly the same as the thoughts we had the day before. So we've got to kind of up our game here. We've got to get beyond that kind of repetition, which doesn't necessarily get us out of the hamster wheel. So this is a real call at this new moon for us to become more conscious of our thinking, more masterful of our thinking, because we can only achieve our focus and intention if we are very conscious of our thinking. It's the only way it can happen, because Gemini does have the tendency, it's a mutable sign, so it's like shining light through a prism, and the light splits, it's divergent. So there can be a tendency with Gemini, although it's extremely creative, to become scattered and distracted here and there, which is part of the creativity in a way, but we need to bring it back to focus, to be on track with what we're creating. Gemini is also very linked to social media. It's one of the signs, along with Aquarius, that's linked with social media. And I will come back to that in a moment. It's also linked, for instance, to voting systems as well. We may see some cyber attacks happening round about this time, because there's an important Uranus conjunction, which I'm going to be coming on to. And with Mercury, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. So Mercury here is still retrograde until the 3rd of June. So 2637 of Taurus. And for instance, we have a very tight square here between Saturn, 25 of Aquarius, and Mercury, the ruler of Gemini. And that can also suggest, as well as Mercury having moved retrograde through Gemini, suggests the same, that we could be seeing more censorship. It's literally more control on communication. That's a strong possibility. But equally, because this is a new moon in Gemini linked to social media, I also think we will see more social media platforms coming out. It's very interesting here that Mercury as the ruler is aspected at this new moon by every outer planet: Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So it's we are going to be getting a lot of information at this time, a lot of information. What's very interesting, I haven't drawn it in here, but Mercury is very tightly conjunct a fixed star called Algol, A-L-G-O-L, which is at 26 degrees 10 minutes of Taurus. So Mercury is within less than half a degree of a conjunction to Algol. And that position of Mercury is, of course, picking up on the total lunar eclipse, which was at 25 of Scorpio. So the moon was at 25 Scorpio, the sun was at 25 of Taurus. So there's some kind of a repeat, an echo here, with Mercury coming back to that position, retrograding to that position. It's bringing back the themes of the total lunar eclipse, which were very much about revelation, disclosure, etc. Go back and listen. It was a big deal around those. Algol doesn't have a very pretty reputation. It's very linked to decapitation, and that can be literal decapitation, or more likely removing a head of state, let's say. So we could see a country or two who are losing their heads, losing their leadership. That's very linked to Algol symbolism. Mercury in Taurus is pretty direct and blunt. It's kind of tell it like it is. And we are given strength in that by Pluto at 28 of Capricorn being in quite a close trine to Mercury. So telling it like it is, speaking truth with conviction, depth, and power. So we're going to see a lot of that in the world. I mentioned that Mercury was also square to Saturn here, which could be around more censorship, but it can also act, Saturn on Mercury in a hard aspect can act as a kind of positive reality check of really making sure that your ideas are workable for the long term. Saturn is about what we're building for the long term. And what is very interesting here as well is we have a wide triple conjunction here between Mercury at 26, Uranus at 16, and the North Node at 21 of Taurus. Now, normally you wouldn't count that 10-degree orb of Uranus to Mercury, because 10 degrees is really a bit too wide for a conjunction. I'd go to about 7 with a conjunction. However, because the North Node is exactly at the midpoint by degree of Uranus and Mercury, the North Node kind of pulls these two principles together. So Mercury is about our thinking, our ideas. It tends to be lower mind, daily coming and going and thinking, and neighbors and friends and social media, chatter. I mean, Twitter is such a great word for social media when represented by Mercury and Gemini. Gemini is also linked to birds, feathered birds as well, by the way, so that's even more interesting. But Uranus is about higher mind, higher ideas, downloads, insights. And this could be even related to galactic energy. Many people are channeling galactic beings. Several of my friends channel galactic beings. And that isn't so wild and far out. I mean, remember that we are made of stardust. Even Professor Brian Cox says that. We are made of stardust. And I think in our earthly existence, we've tended to think of us as humans and other beings as kind of way out there and very different. But we came from there. We came from the galaxies. And I think this whole period that we're going through of evolution is not about diving into something completely new, but actually remembering our galactic citizenry and stepping back into it from a higher level. So what this triple conjunction can bring in is a lot of new ideas, new thinking, downloads, insights for the benefit of our future collective destiny, North Node, in Taurus, related to earth, nature, food, agriculture, food supplies, finance, money, wealth, currencies, cryptocurrencies, Uranus, digital, Taurus, money. We're going to see a lot more of those coming online. And remember the whole issue between centralization and decentralization that I've talked a great deal about. So this becomes very exciting, suggesting a new level of thinking, new ideas around those things. Also, to complete all the outer planets aspecting Mercury, we have Neptune, 25 of Pisces, in quite a close sextile to Mercury. So this is about your creativity, your imagination, and you put all these together. Mercury is ruler of this new moon in Gemini, and this is about a new kind of thinking coming out, a new kind of thinking, and really be relentless in focusing on what you want to create. Energize, feed, just be unrelenting in what you're going to create in the world. And another aspect of New Earth, the fact that Jupiter this month has moved over the Aries point, the fact that Mars will be moving over that Aries point, first degree of the zodiac, on the 25th of the month, the fact that I've talked in many, many videos about the long-running square between Pluto at 28 of Capricorn and Haumea, which is in the very last couple of degrees of Libra. Haumea is a very powerful symbol for New Earth. She's regenerative creative energy. Remember, her myth is around being able to regenerate the land even though it was laid waste for whatever reason. She can summon wild food. So these Kuiper belt objects, these dwarf planets, are really represent the evolution of our consciousness. They're another level of being that we're moving towards, and that's why I found them so incredibly inspiring and exciting. So, as I say, I'm very much referring to the work, the research of Kelly Hunter. She's done some wonderful research into these Kuiper belt objects and dwarf planets. And here we see Manwe, M-A-N-W-E, at 1 degree of Aries, very first degree of the entire zodiac. So again, this sense of newness coming in as the old collapses. And I've talked in many, many videos over the last couple of years about the collapse of old systems, the old order, very much the signature of Pluto moving through these last few degrees in Capricorn. And it finally moves out at the end of 2024 when a lot of demolition will have happened of any systems that are not for our highest good, let us say. But with that collapse, we are seeing the birth of something very new at a higher level. These Kuiper belt objects, dwarf planets, have fine energy. They are operating at the quantum level, not the 3D level. And that's why I think they're so inspiring. So I'm going to stop sharing screen here, and let me talk about the symbolism of Manwe. In fact, Tolkien wrote about this really in his story of creation in Silmarillion, that Manwe was married to Vada. In myth, Vada is known as the Star Lady. She placed the sun and moon and stars in the firmament, and together they created the universe. And Manwe is known as the highest intelligence of divine source, linked to dimensions outside of time, far-seeing, Buddha mind, the chief archangel closest to the mind of God. Again, I'm referring to Kelly's work here. So he is very linked to world renewal. So isn't that interesting? We're linked to world renewal. And we have another, obviously, very strong symbol with Homer. So with Jupiter moving over the Aries point, Mars moving over the Aries point, Manwe at the Aries point, we have some very strong signatures here of new Earth. And really, I know there is an immense amount of, just thousands of terrible, terrible things happening in the world. I'm acutely aware of that, death and war and destruction, and it's just overwhelming if we think of those. But we can work energetically, and it honestly makes such a difference that if we can starve out the scary and love in the good, then we will be changing the whole frequency of the collective. And it really does work. There's tons of evidence about doing this, but we've got to have focus and intention very clearly to do that. Starving out the scary, loving in the good. And that's why we've got to master our minds with this Gemini energy. And a phrase came to me this morning. I've actually been for the last few days watching it, just the most amazing rescue. For the last few years, I followed a wonderful organization called the Global Sanctuary for Elephants. And these wonderful people headed by Scott and Kat Blay had organized rescues of elephants in pretty grim circumstances. Could be circuses or zoos or whatever. And in the last few days, they've rescued a mother and daughter from, let us just say, extremely limited circumstances at a zoo in Argentina. And it was all on live stream as they made the journey. And I was following it on Facebook. It's also on Instagram, but remember, I'm not on Instagram. And just the phrase kept coming to me of, these guys are rock stars for love. They are rock stars to do that 5-day grueling 2,000-mile journey, very little sleep, elephants in crates, to get them to paradise. They've now, I'm getting quite emotional here, they've now landed in paradise of several thousand acres of sanctuary, where they're going to be loved and cared for and free to do what elephants do. And so you might think, well, why are you wasting all that emotion on elephants? Well, I happen to be a big animal lover, but we can do this. We can be a rock star for anyone. War-torn people, children, people in disease or torment or oppression. But we can be rock stars, because I think we tend to think of love as being weak or passive. Love is a fire. Love is an absolute fire. And that was what was driving those guys on that very long 5-day, 2,000-mile trip, to take the elephants from limitation to paradise. Love is a fire. Love is super strong. It's warrior energy, which is what we're seeing a lot of this month and ongoing. So I hope that's helped you. And, if we could all step into that energy, what a different world we would have if we were all rock stars for love. So if you'd like more information on my books, my videos, my teaching videos, just check out my website, pamgregory.com. Don't forget to set a new intention, and really increasingly with every intention, and focus, not just for your own personal life, which of course is very important, but also for the collective, for New Earth, because that's the kind of energy we're moving into. God bless. Bye for now. Catch you next time.